And thank you everybody for joining us today. As Andrea said, my name is Vincent Seddon. I'm here today representing TBAT Innovation and working very closely with Oxlep to support some information regarding grant funding. So in terms of today, we have got a number of slides that I'm going to share with you, which will give you an overview of what is grant funding, what do we mean by grant funding, what is the grant funding landscape in terms of what is available for you to apply into, and then we'll have a little look into the actual process of moving forward to apply for a grant funding opportunity. And we'll have a look at the application process, which is pretty standard across the board when you look at making an application. So my role is very much around the business development side. So we get involved with businesses who are looking to apply for grant funding, and I'm more than happy to help after today's session with any one-to-one catch-ups that you may want to book with ourselves. I'm also joined by my colleague, Tom Preston. Tom is one of our expert bid writers, and he puts together compelling applications on behalf of businesses and projects to be able to apply for grant funding. So we'll both be looking to answer any questions that you may have today as we move through the slide deck. As Andrea said, please do feel free to pose any questions that you might have. We'll try and make this session as interactive as we possibly can. And any questions that you might want to save till the end, hopefully we'll have an opportunity to answer those live. So to start us off today, I get asked the question quite often, why should I bother with grant funding? What are the benefits to the business? And what is that likely to do for me? So we always say that grant funding is always an opportunity to bring in funding that is absolutely free money, no requirement to pay that back. So first things first, grant money is received into the business to be able to spend on further developments to allow you to grow and be a disruptor in the marketplace. We also find that when attracting grant funding, it gives you a green light for further investment. So quite often businesses will be looking to gather investment to support growth. But also when you are looking to apply grant funding, the grant funding that you may receive is not always 100% funded. So there may be a gap in the funding that you may need to plug and provide to be able to deliver that project. Once you've been through the grant funding process, investors are more likely to look favourably on investing into you as a company because you've been through some stringent due diligence with the funding body. It also stimulates collaboration. So when conducting new work in a business, you may find that you don't now have the resource or the technical ability to deliver that project. So with grant funding, it encourages businesses to work together in order to deliver a piece of innovation or piece of work that may lead to commercialization. And finally, it removes the risk of investing any company money. So any cash flow that you've got going through the business at the moment, investing that into a new product or service that you may want to launch can be quite risky. So in order to attract grant funding, it removes that risk and allows you to spend the money risk-free in terms of the business and the cash flow requirements moving forward. So those are a few of the things that we look for when applying for grant funding that may be a bonus or an advantage to you as a business to move forward with the process. So what's available when we talk about grant funding? What kind of things may you look to apply into? So we've pulled together a grant funding landscape to show to you the opportunity that may be available for you in your product or service that you're maybe creating at the moment to commercialise. We are quite lucky with the amount of grant funding that we have available, and we can only see this increasing over the coming months. With Brexit and our removal from some of the deals that we had in relation to grant funding and the European funding, we are likely to see a few more opportunities coming our way through UK funding, but we are also going to have an opportunity to continue applying into some of those European funds as well. They will be in a little bit more detail around April, but we should have an opportunity to apply into European funding as well. I specifically haven't included that on the slide today because we're a little bit unsure what that might look like, And as soon as we've got more details, we will be able to deliver that out to yourselves. But in terms of UK funding, we split UK funding into what's called an open call for competition or a themed competition. So the open call for competition is the SMART grant that you can see at the top of the timeline. This is an opportunity provided by Innovate UK and is a rolling call for competition. So normally we find that this is always open on a 3-month rolling basis for anybody looking to apply for funding to fund an innovation within the business. There doesn't have to be a specific theme when applying for the SMART grant. However, you do need to have a clear route to market and a clear opportunity to commercialise your idea. We'll go into a little bit more detail around the SMART grants in the following slides, but that is an open competition that you can apply into should you not find a grant that is specifically looking to invest in the work that you're doing. Underneath the SMART grant, there are a series of what we call themed competitions. So this is where a specific grant opportunity is available and the money that is being provided should be spent in a specific industry or a specific way. So for example, the one directly under SMART grants is a new competition that's being launched to support the farming community. And this is an opportunity for businesses who are innovating and directly working with the farming community to improve farming methods and also working towards net zero carbon emission for those kind of projects. And we move through a number of other opportunities that are on the screen here. So we've got the SBRI rail demonstrators. This is for businesses working within the rail industry. We've also got DASA. So this is for opportunities within the UK defence. We've got the NIHR, the I4I product development. This is biotech, medtech. You've also got the APC 18, so that's in transportation and autonomous vehicles, all the way through to commercialising quantum technologies. So there is quite a diverse opportunity that's available for you at the moment to apply into in terms of a grant on a national level. And this list will only continue to grow. This is not an overall picture of the grant funding landscape, just a snapshot. So a bit of a tip of the iceberg. If you want to keep up to date with what's available from a national point of view, the UKRI website, which is the funding body of the UK government, provides an overview of all of the grant funding opportunities that are available at that time. And it will give you an overview of the eligibility and scope that you must meet before applying into that fund. So a great way to keep in touch with what's available. The other opportunity for you to keep in touch with as well is the Knowledge Transfer Network. This is a bit of a sister method that's been applied on behalf of Innovate UK and the UKRI to support projects that may be looking to access funding. So they're a support mechanism to give you an overview of the funding that's available at the time and the ones that you may want to look forward to in terms of your specific idea or growth opportunity within the business. So that's hopefully a bit of a snapshot of the national opportunities that are available. There are also some local level funding opportunities, and I'm just going to bring Andrea in to give an overview of some of the things that Oxlep are doing that you might want to look at for some of the work that you're doing within the local area and of course your business.
Yes, thanks, Vincent. So those of you familiar with Oxlep will be familiar with some of the grant schemes, but the two really to draw to your attention today are the innovation support for business, Go Create grants, which we put some details of there. It's a third contribution, which is different to how some of the other grants that Oxlep run work. It's for innovation projects or innovative projects, and applications are always open. So we accept submissions once a month, so usually the third Friday of every month. And the turnaround is really pretty quick, to be honest. It's within 3 weeks the panel meet and you'll have a decision on whether or not you've been successful. There is an Oxlep grant webinar that is running, I think, on the 4th of March. Just check the events section of Oxlep just to make sure. That's where we go through all of the eligibility criteria for the ISFB grant scheme. So it'd be good if you could attend that. We ran the first one a couple of weeks ago and it was totally oversubscribed. So we've actually increased the number of people that can join. So just check the events listing on Oxlep. And then the second one, which, forgive me, I don't have much more information than what I've got there, but this has been rumbling around for the last couple of months. We have a capital grant scheme that's about to be announced. So that will be for capital grants between 25 and 100k. We would expect to have applications for grants in excess of 25k, but it's capital grant as opposed to revenue grant funding. It's match funded, so 50% match funded. We will be asking for expressions of interest and doing some kind of pre-qualification before proceeding to invite you to apply. It'll be launching the 1st of March and there will be a launch webinar around that date as well. So please do just keep watching the events page on Oxlep and there will be further information and events linked to these two grant schemes announced very soon. But yes, thank you for that, Vincent. I will go back to mute myself again.
Thank you, Andrea. It's great to see some of the work that Oxlep's doing, and I think we're very lucky to have the support from Oxlep. And all of the work that they're doing, not just from a grant perspective, but also from an educational point of view as well. So do keep an eye on the Oxlep website for the work that they're doing and the opportunities to move forward with that. So let's move on to have a look at some of the intricacies of grant funding. So we've chosen the Innovate UK Smart Grant to provide some more detail, but this is quite a common theme that we find across grant funding in terms of what the project must demonstrate and focus on. So whilst we're focusing on smart grants today, this is something that you will find on the majority of grants in terms of the first things that you need to cover off when you're looking to apply into a grant. So for the Innovate UK Smart Grants, there is currently one available at the moment that has a deadline of the 26th of May. There are a couple of things that you need to be aware of before looking into making an application. You must be able to deliver a project. Now, a project basically is solving a challenge or a problem that you have found. And this is where you are creating an innovation that would lead to a new product or service that must have a strong and deliverable business plan and a clear route to market with an opportunity for significant return on investment. So you may have an idea in mind at the moment that you might want to work on that might not be in this kind of stage. The thing that I would encourage you to do at the moment is, if you've got the idea but you haven't thought about the problem or solution, think backwards a little bit. So think about, what is your innovation going to solve? Is there a clear problem or a clear challenge that you know about that your innovation would cover? And once you've covered that, will it have an opportunity to turn into a commercial business with a great opportunity to move forward to a significant return on investment? So it's a little bit Dragon's Den, shall we say, in terms of what you should focus on first. Is your idea a good opportunity to create a business from, and will it be a leader in the market? To keep it very, very short and sweet. There are a few areas that your project may focus on. So when you look at the grant, there's a couple of different levels that your innovation might be at. So when you're submitting an application, it will be an application for funding in relation to a feasibility study, industrial research, or experimental development. So feasibility study can include market research. So this is very much early stage. So you've got a bit of an idea, but you're not quite sure if it's going to work, or if it's feasible to even do the project. So you can apply for funding for that project. The level of funding that you might look to achieve here is up to 70% of the project cost. There is a bit of a scale in terms of size of business versus the amount of funds that you could receive, but the maximum amount funded here would be 70% for a feasibility study. For industrial research, this is where you have an idea and you think that it is going to be a good opportunity to take to market, but you haven't quite got a prototype or an MVP. So you need to do some work in order to do that piece of, shall we say, development to get to a point where you've got a bit of a first of a kind piece of kit. And that's what we call industrial research. This is creating the actual innovation that you're looking to commercialise. The maximum amount funded for this one is 70%. So again, there will be a 30% requirement for you to input into that project. But feasibility and industrial research are the highest funded methods within this type of grant at 70%. And then you can move into experimental development. So this is where you've got a prototype, however, you need to do some more trials and testing on that prototype before it's ready for market. And the level of funding you could look to achieve for this is up to 45% of the project cost. So less than the other two. And the reason for that is because the process that you've been through to get to the space you are at when you've got a prototype, most of the risk involved has been taken care of before then. So the amount of funding is considerably less. But good to know that you can still look to achieve up to 45% of the cost involved. Typically for these type of grants, you would be looking at around a share of 25 million in total. Your project must cost between 25,000 and 2 million as a project cost, and the duration of your project between 6 and 36 months. So you must also either be leading the application or having support from an SME into the application as a partnership as well. If you're leading the application yourself, you can apply for up to 500,000. If you're going into a partnership, you can apply for more money and a longer duration. And that's pretty standard across the board when we look at applying into grant funding.
Vincent, just a quick question. Can you apply for more than one?
Yes, you can. So I'll answer that question in two answers, if that's okay. So if you are applying for the same project, you can have 2 attempts under the funding body. So for example, if you are putting an application into a SMART grant through Innovate UK, you have one opportunity as a first submission. If you were unsuccessful the first time, you can then resubmit for a further attempt, but you wouldn't be able to then resubmit should you be unsuccessful for a second attempt. If you are doing continuous development of a similar product or service, then you can apply for funding for each stage of that development, and that would be classed as a different project. You can also apply for the same project into 2 different funding schemes. So you might want to put an application into the Innovate UK SMART grant and also submit it into the NIHR Eye for Eye. What you can't do is be double funded. So if you were lucky enough to be successful with both, you would have to choose one to take forward. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Great. So that's the Innovate UK SMART. As we've said, this is pretty standard across the board. So whilst we're focusing on SMART, this is quite a common theme that we find across the grant funding landscape. So if we have a look a little bit further, once you've gone through the application stage and submitted, what's the likelihood of you being successful? So again, we've chosen the Innovate UK SMART grant because that's the theme we're following at the moment, to give you an idea. Now, the SMART grant is an extremely competitive opportunity to apply for funding, mainly because it is not focusing on a specific theme. So please don't let this slide put you off. We've included this to give you an idea of how the applications are assessed and the average success rate. So we've taken this information from the January 2020 SMART grant, where 2,400 applications were assessed. 152 of those applications were successful, leaving an average success rate of 6.2%. So a very low amount of applications were funded during that round. the score range was between 82.6 and 91.4. This is probably the one thing to take away from this slide. And the reason being is that the average pass rate for each application received is normally around this figure. So each question, as we move through the application process shortly, is scored out of 10 and an average taken to give you a score out of 100. So they are competitive, but what we would say is if you have a very good innovation and a very well-written application, there's no reason why you shouldn't be successful. And to give you a comparison, the previous round to this one, we saw 701 actions and 64 were successful with a success rate of 8.5. So this round was very competitive because the deadline was about a month and a half after the pandemic hit. So we saw a huge amount of companies wanting to move forward to spread the risk and look to apply for funding to give them an opportunity to innovate their way through the pandemic. And we've seen some great success stories where grant funding has allowed them to do that, and without, I'm not quite sure where their business would have been. So there has been some great successes through that application. And last year, we saw a lot of grant opportunities being provided to support businesses through the pandemic, and also innovations to support the fantastic work that has been done to combat COVID-19. So if we move forward into a couple of things that you need to consider before applying. So the first thing is, as we've said on the previous slide, what is the challenge that's going to be solved by your technology? So be really confident that you know what that is and you are able to display that to the assessors in a very unassumptive way. Also, have a think about the market that your innovation product or service may fit into. So whilst you may be solving a challenge in one area, the market that your innovation might lead to could be slightly different. So be certain of the market that that's going to support. Also, understand whether you're going to need partners and to create a consortium. So as we said on the previous slides, you may not be able to deliver the project solely on your own. You might need to bring in subcontractors or have them as an official partner in the grant funding application. And also have a think about how much your project might cost, because there's different criteria that you'll need to meet depending on the grant that you're applying for. Now, each of them will have a project cap in terms of the amounts that they're looking to fund. So quite often people will say, what is the sweet spot for applying for grant funding? And that's a little bit of a myth. There isn't a sweet spot, but there is an average grant of money awarded. So your request for funds needs to be realistic depending on the work that you're trying to achieve when it's being assessed. And also make sure that you understand if there is a competition that matches the project that you're looking to achieve. So when we looked at the grant funding landscape, there are a number of different themed competitions that are available. Just make sure that you understand where your project or requirement for grant funding fits. And that might not be Innovate UK. It might be that you want to look forward to applying into an OXLEP funded opportunity, or you may want to look at some other funding opportunities as well, such as DASA and some of the NHS funding as well. So be absolutely certain that you've picked the right opportunity for yourself. If you are not sure about that, or you'd like some support in understanding that wider landscape, then there are a number of different ways that you can achieve that support. You can look towards OXLEP, or you can look towards people like ourselves that have a really good handle on what is available or what might be coming available in the near future.
Vincent, just another quick question. Caroline's asking, she admits she might have missed this, but do project costs just include R&D, or do they also include overhead costs?
Both. So we'll get to that a little bit further down the line in terms of what you can include.
Perfect.
But both of those can be included. And there's quite a broad spectrum, actually, in terms of the costs that can be put into the grant.
That's super. Thank you.
Okay, so what other things should you look at before applying? So each different grant that you may look to approach for grant funding normally will have a briefing event. So this at the moment is taking place virtually for the majority of grants, and normally consists of a Zoom pretty similar to the one in which we find ourselves in today. And this gives you an overview of what they are actually looking to fund. Because sometimes when you review the scope and the eligibility of a grant, it might not be entirely clear what kind of projects they're looking to fund. So we would always suggest that you attend the briefing event. And this is a great opportunity to ask any questions that you may have before moving forward to a full application. Make sure that you understand the competition criteria. This can be done via the portal, via UKRI or whatever funding body you're looking towards in terms of reading the scope and the eligibility. But again, this can be covered off at the briefing event if you have any specific questions. We always recommend that you engage project partners early as well. So if you are looking to work with other businesses or gain support from other areas, bring them into the project early, because sometimes we find that the resource that's required is not necessarily available, or there's areas that need to be covered off before submitting an application. And a partner is different to a subcontractor. So a partner is an official business that you would like to write into the grant, whereas a subcontractor would be somebody supporting the grant, but you would be leading it. And also make sure that you set an agreed cost plan. So as we said on the previous slide, make sure that you understand what the level of funds is that you might need to bring in to cover that innovation. This can be slightly agile as you move through the project, as there are risks that you may look to overcome. And this is something that can be worked on as you move through the project, but it needs to be a very realistic figure that you come up with once you've been through the cost plan. So those are a few things to consider before you move towards the application. So you've done all of that, you've understood exactly what it is that you want to achieve, you've found the opportunity to apply for funding, and you're ready to move forward. What does the process look like? So we've brought together an overview of the Innovate UK process here, but again, for all other funding bodies, the process is very similar. Normally, you will register your interest on the portal that they're using, because the applications quite often are done through an online portal. And this is an opportunity for you to register your details as a company and who's going to be working on the project to be able to then move through into the application. This also gives you an opportunity to add any partners that you may want to work with, so that all of the details are in one place and the assessors can see that before they move into the actual main body of your application. And all of this is done before writing the application. Once you've got to that stage, you can then look to move forward with the detail around what it is that you're looking to achieve. The first thing that you would need to put into your application is an overview of the application details. So with Innovate UK, and this is pretty similar to other application processes, this is an opportunity for you to set the scene of what it is that you're trying to achieve. So this is not scored by the assessors, but gives them an overview of what it is that they're likely to read on through when they look at your application. So details of the application team, so all of the organisations involved, so this would include your partners. Application details, so an overarching title of what it is that you're looking to do, the start date of when you hope to start the project. With each grant that you may look to apply into, there will be specific start dates that you can work within. Quite often they will say your project must start by X date. So make sure that your start date is within that duration. And also the duration of how long your project is likely to take. So again, there will be certain parameters depending on the grant that you're applying into of how long your project must last. And normally there's a minimum and a maximum amount of time. The research category. So this is the category of what your research will contain of. There'll also be a project summary. Note that there is a 400 word count. This gives you an opportunity to describe the project and also, crucially, what makes it innovative. So what's the new thing that you're going to be creating? And also a public description. So this is a description of the project that will be published publicly once you go through the application. And finally, the scope. So a description of how your project fits the competition scope of what you're applying for. And this is the very beginning of the application that helps you set the scene. Some of our top tips: do use a high-level technical detail. Don't go into too much detail. Do provide continuity of language for the whole document. So however you start the process here with the words that you describe, make sure that you use continuity of that as you work through the application. Do not talk about anything which is not in the main application. So make sure there is consistency around what you put in this first section, which will then move in to the remainder of the application. And try not to use abbreviations without introducing them. So avoid acronyms and shortening any areas that you might want to put into this area, because when your application is assessed, the funder will try and bring in some industry experts who will have experience of what you're trying to achieve, but there may also be some mainstream assessors that might not be within your industry. So try and make sure that it is descriptive as possible and there's no room for assumption when reading through this information. So that's the first step before moving towards the application. We then move into the main body of the application, and quite often we find on a standard grant application that you will need to answer 10 questions. And those 10 questions will be similar across the board. For an Innovate UK application, the majority of the time, and especially with the SMART grant, you will have a word count limit. For this type of application that we're looking at today, which is the SMART grant, the word limit is 400 words per answer. That doesn't give you a lot of opportunity to describe in a huge amount of detail what it is that you're trying to achieve under that question. So the first question that you may need to answer is around the need or the challenge. So what is the business need, technological challenge, or market opportunity behind your innovation? And this is how it would appear within the application. You will have an overarching question, and then you will have some bullet points which will lead you in terms of what they're looking for. So this is an opportunity to describe the current state of the art, define any limitations or gaps in the market and how the innovation will fill the gap, present any work that you've already completed to demonstrate why your company has the right to deliver this project, and also has the right people to do the work, and also for the right reason. You will also have the opportunity to describe how your project aligns with existing legislation and government strategies as well. So for example, net zero, carbon emissions, the regeneration of industries, acceleration of digital, those kind of things are good examples of how that might align to what the government are trying to achieve. A couple of top tips with this: do link overcoming the technical challenge to a clear market opportunity. So your challenge that you're trying to overcome must then lead to a great market opportunity and commercialization plan. Do show that you know what else is out there as well. So think about any competition that may be out there in the marketplace that you're aware of, and use high-level information to avoid repetition. So the reason we say this, as you move into the next few questions, you may find what you wanted to say in question 1 actually needs to be displayed in another question. And don't assume the assessor is already aware of the underlying need for your technology or that they're an expert in your field. Sometimes when we talk about what we're good at, we assume that other people that may read the text or maybe listening to us understand what we're talking about. So try and be as clear as possible in terms of what points you're trying to get across within that question. So from question 1, that takes us nicely into question 2, which is around the approach and innovation. So what approach will you take, and where will the focus of the innovation be? So with this question, note that you can submit one appendix to support your answer. And this must be in a PDF and can be up to 2 pages long. The font must be eligible though, at 100% zoom. So make sure that the formatting of any PDF appendix that you put into this question is clear and able to be read. This question is an opportunity to set out how your proposed technology solution addresses the need and that your approach is the best one. So with the greatest likelihood of this successful development being an adoption, and also a great opportunity to move forward. So this is also an opportunity to show how your project will improve on current state of the art. So make sure that if there is a further development on what we currently have at the moment, that this is very well detailed. You must be also able to measure your solution and what will offer out of the back of what it is that you're looking to provide, and also that it has a competitive advantage as well. This also gives you a great opportunity to describe the key innovative outputs and how they align with the technological challenge and what the tangible outputs will be to demonstrate the requirements that have been met. And you must also show that you have freedom to operate. So it's really important that if you are creating an innovation, that you've done some research to show that you as a business have the freedom to be able to operate that innovation. So do you have a patent? Do you know of any others that may have a patent? And if you don't, it may be a good opportunity to speak to an IP expert that may be able to do some research around what that looks like and give you the reassurance that you can move forward. A couple of top tips on this question. Do show how your tech works in a way that demonstrates how your tech is different from anything else out there. Make sure that you link technical innovation to risks as well. And don't overdo the technical detail. It really could be very easy to get lost in this question and write thousands of words, but make sure that every time you write a sentence, that it is aligned to the bullet points that are provided within this question. There has been a question come through that I'm just going to answer at this stage, Andrew, if you don't mind, around the detail that is provided within the questions that are provided. So the question is, are the details covered by any confidentiality matters with respect to the assessors? So the information that you put within the application is dealt with strict confidence. And that is something that is set out from the beginning. So you can rest assured that the information that you put into the application is strictly confidential and is only shared with the people required to be able to assess your application. You will need to exploit your idea moving forward should you be successful, but that's the reason why you are given an opportunity at the beginning of the application to write information around the application that you would be happy to be publicly identified.
Vincent, that's super. I wasn't going to interrupt you actually, I was going to leave it to the end, but since you're taking a question, can I ask you another one?
Of course.
We have somebody who's asked, I noticed the average grant was 333k. I only need 20 or 30k. Will they look at lower levels of required funding, or will that be frowned upon?
So it wouldn't necessarily be frowned upon, but you would need to make sure that the level of funding you're trying to attract fits within the funding levels that they're looking for. So, for example, the Innovate UK Smart Grant, you would need to have a minimum project value of 25,000. So one thing to keep in mind here is when the assessors are moving through the application, they will probably be asking themselves the question of why do you need the funds? Why can't this project be funded through the company? And if you can display that in a way that shows that there is a clear requirement for those funds, then there shouldn't be any reason why that would be looked at any differently to a 300,000 project value.
That's super, thank you.
Okey-doke. So we move on to question 3. And question 3 is all around the team and resources. So this is an opportunity for you to provide an overview of who is in the project team and what are their roles. So again, you can submit one appendix describing the skills and experience of the main people working on the project. And this is an opportunity to support the answer. So quite often we find that within this appendix, there are some mini CVs of the people that are conducting the work and involved with the project. And this really helps the assessors to visualize who's going to be working on the project, and an opportunity for you to show the credibility of the team that you have in place to deliver the innovation and support the project through to commercialization. Again, this must be in a PDF. It can be up to 4 pages long, but the font must be clearly readable at 100% zoom as well. So make sure that when you are submitting appendices, that they are clear and there's no room for any error or assumption around what it is that you're looking at. This question is an opportunity for you to show the project team are ideal for the project as well and their expertise. So that can be done through answering the question, or of course through the PDF appendix that you may look to submit as support for this question. There is also an opportunity to show that you have access to all of the facilities that you need to perform the project and provide details of any subcontractors required to complete the project. Quite often we find that it's important to have a low level of subcontracted work within the application because the assessors will be looking to see how much of the project can be covered within the project team. And this is also an opportunity to identify any need for recruitment and how you intend to fill that gap. So sometimes we have projects that are looking to get underway. There is a gap in terms of the people required, but there is an intent to recruit. So this is an opportunity to show that within the application as well. Some top tips around this question. Again, be clear about why each partner is participating in the project and why they are the right partner. So if you've got partners that are joining you, you need to be able to display why you've chosen them and what they're going to do to support the application. Also justify why a subcontractor is needed and not a partner. So if you do decide to bring in a subcontractor, make sure that you are clear why they're a subcontractor and not a partner within the team. Don't try to cover up any gaps in the team or the consortium either. So if there are gaps, make sure that they're clearly identified with some rationale about what it is that you're looking to do to plug that gap. So question 3 moves us into question 4, which is around the market awareness and what does the market you are targeting look like? So again, an overarching question with some bullet points. If your project is highly innovative, where the market may be unexplored, make sure that you describe or explain what the market size might be and how your project will try to explore the market's potential as well. That gives an opportunity to bring that area to life. This question is an opportunity to demonstrate that you have performed the market research and have basic knowledge of the market to give confidence that the route to market and the strategy that has been planned is credible. And also to show that the current UK position in the market requires what you're doing into that. And also an opportunity to identify your expected customers and market share as well. Some top tips for this kind of question. Do be specific about which subsectors of the overall market that the technology addresses, and do show that the technology or innovation meets the market need. Don't be unrealistic about how much of the market or the technology can actually capture. So make sure that you are realistic based on your research that you've conducted for this question. Question 5 is around outcomes and route to market. So how are you going to grow your business and increase your productivity into the long term as a result of the project? So if there is any research organisation activity in the project, make sure that you describe your plans to spread the project's research outputs over the reasonable timescale and also how you expect to use the results generated from the project in further research activities. This question is a really good opportunity to describe where you are currently and what you can do with the outputs. Also, who are your customers going to be and the value to them. A couple of top tips on this. Do link to tangible project outputs, reflect different beneficiaries in the value chain, but don't ignore other stakeholders who will be critical to getting the technology to market. So a really good opportunity here to define the route to market and some of the outcomes in terms of your project. Question 6 is around the wider impact. So what impact might this project have outside of the project team? So this is a really good opportunity to demonstrate why your project should be funded by public money, as it will have impacts that extend far beyond the organisation. So this is a wider question to show exactly why your project should be funded with public money. And again, this is the type of question that you will see on all grant funding applications, because this is a real key in terms of the assessment piece of why your project should receive that funds and what benefit that's going to have outside of this project. Again, so that's a little bit of an overview there of question 6. And then we move on to question 7. So this is all around project management. How will you manage the project effectively? So again, this question, you can submit a project plan or a Gantt chart as an appendix to support the answer. It must be in a PDF and can be up to 2 pages long. The font must be, again, clearly readable. And this kind of question is a great opportunity to demonstrate that you have a clear plan of how the project will be managed, by who, and how the project will be carried out. This is an opportunity to provide a detailed project plan, again, via a Gantt chart, highlighting any work packages, sub-work packages, tasks and milestones. And these will be used once you've moved forward through the application and been successful to monitor the productivity of the project once you get into that area. So those areas will be clear and defined in terms of milestones that you want to work towards. Top tip for this question, do make use of the appendix available for your Gantt chart. This is a really good way of displaying an overview of how you're going to manage the project, which is extremely key in terms of making sure that the money is spent and the work is conducted in the way that you hope to. Question 8 is all around the risks. What are the main risks involved for this project? So you can submit a risk register as an appendix to support your answer. Again, it must be in a PDF. And this question is a really good opportunity to provide details on the technical, commercial, managerial and environmental risks that will be faced during the project and how you will mitigate these. Make sure that you detail any regulations relevant to any follow-on and exploitation of the project. You need to demonstrate that despite the risks, that your project is well thought out and is worth the investment of public money. A couple of tips for this question. Do use a risk register as your appendix to utilise the space available. Align the technical risks to the main technical work packages, but don't hide behind the negative risks. Always find a way to mitigate them. Question 9 is around added value. So what impact would an injection of public funding have on the business involved? So this is an opportunity to demonstrate why you need the public money again to fund your project rather than funding it yourself. Explain whether you could perform the project without the funding. A couple of tips for this question. Don't present your business case for the need for public money. Sorry, that's not a don't, that's a do. Do present your business case for the need of public money and clearly and concisely do that. Don't try and hide.
Sorry, I just have a very quick question before you go on. So we've been asked if you can just clarify technology. So could a smart grant be used for an operational model that could be replicated? Thinking of the healthy aging grant in particular.
Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily have to be tech. We use technology because that's an overarching word for a new kind of innovation. So we tend to find applications are within science or technology, which is a very broad overview. So in answer to your question specifically, no, doesn't have to be in technology. It can be any kind of innovation that you are creating that solves a challenge that then moves forward to commercialization.
That's super, thank you.
That's okay. So just a final tip on question 9, don't try to hide if you could fund the project yourself, but instead present the reasons why funding would enhance your project. So quite often we find businesses could actually fund the project themselves, but there is a clear requirement as to why they could benefit from the funding and how that would accelerate the research and development of that innovation and also increase the quality of the outputs. So don't be afraid to clearly outline that in that question. And then the final question, question 10, costs and value for money. So this is all around the project costs and the value for what it is that you're looking to create. So you must also submit a full breakdown of the project finances. But this question is a great opportunity to provide the full breakdown of the costs that you and the consortium require for the project and justify them. Make sure that you show how you will match fund the project as well. So again, in the majority of cases, you are looking to achieve up to a maximum of 70% funding. In some rare occasions, you may find a grant that supports 100% of the project cost, which is absolutely brilliant. But in most cases, there will be some match funding required. So this is an opportunity for you to show how you are likely to fund that. You do not need to have 30% of the project costs available in your bank at the time of application. But what you do need to do is show a very realistic overview of how you are planning to fund that gap. So for example, with Innovate UK, the first quarter of your project would be funded by you as the business, and that would be your 30%. So you need to show how your cash flow will support that, as opposed to having the full 30% available at once. There may be a good argument for you to present here as well in terms of the value for money for you and the taxpayer, in terms of how this may move forward to commercialization and being a corporation taxed business thereafter. A couple of tips in relation to this question. Do provide any letters of support if money is coming from another outside source, and don't ask for more money than is required. So make sure that you are putting a realistic amount in for the funds that you are likely to require to deliver the opportunity of this grant. If you are using an expert bid writer for the application, you cannot include the cost of that service within your grant application. So just something to bear in mind if that is something that you are likely to do. So that is question 1 to 10 of a standard Innovate UK application for funding. As we've said quite often throughout this webinar today, these questions are quite common across the grant funding landscape. So whilst we've focused on Innovate UK today to give you an overview of what that looks like, you will see the majority of these questions may be worded slightly differently in other grant applications that you may look to attract. And we would definitely encourage you to have a think about these questions that you found today through the webinar, should you then move towards a full application with a grant opportunity. And look out for some of the similarities between these questions and other questions that you may find in grant applications. The questions that are asked are not trick questions. They're an opportunity to gather information around the work that you're likely to conduct should you be awarded the funding. And also make sure that you are aware of any word counts that may be attached to the question, any opportunities to supply further information via appendices, and any bullet points that are attached to a question, because that will form part of the assessment. And quite often there will be a group of assessors assessing your application. some of which will be industry specific to the industry you're working in, some won't. So make sure that as you are writing the application, it's very clear. And we would always recommend that once you've written an application, you get that reviewed by somebody else that's perhaps not within your business or consortium. And that will give you a good idea of how that reads from somebody that's not involved with the project, so that we can have a look and see if there are any assumptions being made and any areas that you might need to provide a little bit more detail on. So we move on from question 10 to the finance section. And this is where we give you an overview here of the kind of things that you can include. So this goes back to the brilliant question that was answered before in terms of the types of funds that you can include in this section. So you can include labour, so PAYE of any salaried employees that may be working on the project. You can also include any subcontracted fees that you may incur to deliver the project through to commercialisation. You can also include any overheads that may be required, materials that you might use, any travel that is included, and capital depreciation on anything that you may need to buy. So if you need to buy any machines or products that you might need to use to complete your project, you can claim the capital depreciation for the lifetime of the project, not the full cost. So each organisation in the project must complete their own project costs as well. So if you are working with a partner, they will have their own opportunity to put information into the grant application. And any academic institutions will need to complete and upload a GS form. So hopefully that gives you an idea there of the types of finances that you can include into the financial section. There are obviously some other kind of rules and regulations that you need to be aware of under each overhead, but that's something that you can get into the detail of depending on the application that you are submitting. Some top tips that we've moved through today that I'd just like to bring your attention to once again, as these are very important. Making sure that you answer all of the questions, not just the bullet points as well. So you must provide an answer for each question, 1 to 10, and make use of the words that are available. So the example we use today is a 400 word count. This may differ depending on the application that you are submitting moving forward. Avoid using acronyms and technical jargon, and make use of the formatting options as well. So quite often when you are applying via an online portal, you will be able to make use of any formatting to make your answers a little bit more attractive. So you can underline, use bold, italics, things like that, if you want any area of your answer to stand out. And also, most importantly, leave plenty of time for writing, reviewing, and uploading your application. Whilst it might seem that there is only 10 questions to answer and a couple of appendices to submit, the time involved with pulling together a very compelling application is quite considerable. If you are applying into the type of Innovate UK or other funding opportunities similar to that, we would always recommend giving yourself at least a month to pull together your application and make sure that you've done enough research, which can be market research and competitor analysis, to be able to warrant your application. So, with all of that in mind, there is help and guidance that is available to yourself. The support that is available can be minimal or can be bespoke end-to-end. So we as a company, TBAT Innovation, provide support to businesses who are looking to submit an opportunity into a grant application. We are not the only business out there that provides this support. So there are other companies like ourselves. But in terms of the support that we provide, we very much provide an end-to-end support package. So right from the very early stage idea, all the way through to writing an application on your behalf and submitting that into the funding body. And then we also support with grant claim management as well. This is something that you may want to talk about at a later date, but once you've been successful with a grant, you then need to manage that grant moving forward between yourself and the funder. And that can be done at various different intervals of the project, sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly. And this is something that we can help with. And the cost of that can be built into your initial application for the grant claim management. So that's some of the support that is available. You've also got the knowledge transfer network and the opportunity to support the actual funder that's providing that support. On top of all of that support, you have, of course, got Oxlep, who are a huge support in the local ecosystem. And if they don't have the answer, they will know somebody who does. So if you want to reach out to Oxlep, I'm sure that they will be able to support you with any further questions or things that you may think about after today's session that you may need some support with. If anybody would like a one-to-one session after today, I'm more than happy to provide a complimentary one-to-one session with anybody on the webinar today, or anybody who's listening to this as a recorded webinar, to go a little bit more specific into the detail around what it is that you're doing as a business and how you may align to potential grant funding moving forward. So you'll be glad to hear that's the end of me waffling on around grant funding. Hopefully that has brought to life the landscape and the application process that you may look to see. There's an opportunity now for any questions that you may have. I'll do my very best to answer any questions that you pose to us. Any answers that we're not sure of today, we'll go away and do some research and bring that back to you. And I will bring in my colleague, Tom Preston, for any questions that may be required from him. So, Andrea, back over to yourself, if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for such a comprehensive overview. That's really appreciated. That's brilliant. If you can keep your contact details up there so attendees can make a note of those, I would urge you to take Vincent up on his offer of a free one-to-one. I think that is a bit of a no-brainer, actually.